good. All right. Good evening, everyone. So we will call to order. Hopefully we'll have a, oh, there's Josh.
Suzanne Dirkson's present.
Give it a minute for Josh to walk in. Actually, I guess we go ahead and call it order and then they'll chime in. So we'll call to order today's meeting, June 27th. Due attendance, Bill Lesage, back. Oh, did you need me to hold off?
Nope, sorry.
Oh, okay. Nice job. Bill Lesage, back, present.
Peter Eckel, BAC present.
Rita Russell, City Council, present.
Josh Newell, BAC present.
Jackie Lowe, Finance Director.
Sean Lewis, City Manager. Tyson Farmer, Budget Finance.
Jenny Nolan, Budget Administrator present.
Kennetha Julien, Court Administrator.
Sam Watson, Police Chief.
Vance Fender, Deputy Chief.
Suzanne Dirkson, Budget Advisory.
And online,
Tim Dodd, Deputy City Manager.
And Victor, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Victor Rochelle, Public Works Director.
right. Thank you, everyone. Right. So do we have a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes for May 23rd?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, approved. All right, so today, let's see, we are doing police and municipal courts, and then we'll talk about a couple other things regarding training and members' choice. All right, we can go ahead and get started. All right, I think we're ready whenever you guys are.
Do you have the slideshow up or would you like
I
those?
don't, I think Tyson does.
Is it not showing?
No. I think you have it next to it.
I see the tab.
Yeah.
It's only showing my mouse. Years after COVID.
So you got the car all sorted out?
Yeah. Wasn't working, it wasn't things.
That's not acceptable on a day like today.
Like, do it on the weekend, we're like, not playing with this.
Yeah, this last meeting, I was down in Florida when I called it, and I was like, the humidity's not acceptable. Now number 70, it's something you don't like, no.
No.
It's like computers.
No, I can't. I would move.
I live in Louisiana.
Yeah, we can try it from over here.
Yeah.
Folks on the phone, we're just getting the presentation set up.
Overhead projector back.
Start in a second.
That's weird, isn't it?
Find out if you click it there. Darren Fun.
You have to wait for it to
Fun. Ish.
What says?
With my wife beside there.
It's warmer, but I like that.
Mom took care of it.
Because I don't eat.
But so she's ready to
I
be
can
done,
keep
so it's more of like the emotional snack. And then my wife's just so busy, she's trying to take too much of it. It's still flashing one human being, so. So that's really the emotional strain is, that's where she wants to be out there, wants to die.
It's angry if he's too soon.
He doesn't have a lot.
Oh, there it is.
That's in Florida, so.
You have to
But you have
be
to push
paid
it
now.
down.
Oh, yeah. So it's great.
You have to
Yeah,
be paid.
so
We don't
Never
have
had.
it.
it was a little better and Nanny was out of town, so I was like, perfect, we don't have to chop it down there. Great, it's got to be out. So we're still, here actually hasn't, yeah, the guy house here, so. Good luck with that. Yeah, the house. Yes, my goal is to make something like this.
Well, it's okay. Yeah. That's why.
Tell stories.
Well, that would be the story of my life.
That's a lot.
I don't know who's up. Well, there's Vance.
I'll be your flight.
I'll pay some grand checks.
You say when?
All right, thank you. Real except point, like this is the last.
All right, so I'm Kennetha Julien, and as you know, we've introduced ourselves with chief and deputy chief. And we are often put together as the safety component, being the municipal court and the police department. In today's presentation agenda, we'll have to talk about the safety outcome areas, the police department, the municipal court, and then have time for questions at the end. So our safety outcome area, the city that protects and serves a community and its people with professionalism and responsiveness is our goal. The police department does that through their work and their mission, and the court does that by representing or defending, not even defending, clients through representing and presenting clients with respect and dignity. The safety outcome are to innovate in policing, building and place safety. Obviously, our officers, and Vance, if you have anything that you want to chime in on any of these, feel free. But innovation in policing, coming up with creative and ideal solutions and how to review their best practices among other cities and nationally to protect the citizens here in Englewood. Building and place safety. They, as we know, are out in the community, protecting other buildings and spaces in our areas, including parks and other areas within our environment and community. Public safety services, investing in high quality policing and other public safety resources. I know one of the big factors that both city manager and chief present when we have swearing-ins is it is very instrumental and very important to our community to have safety and training for all of our officers and for our community in protecting our officers as well as the members of our community. Policing policies and legitimacy, collecting data and making recommendations related to policing and legitimizing the role of policing. That data and making recommendations based on data and best practices is popular and well informed and a best practice for policing as well as it is for courts. And then responding to emergencies. A goal and safety outcome is for the officers to effectively prepare for and respond to emergencies. And in fact, we've had some trainings in reference to our emergency responses and our overall emergency responses with city and other directors and staff within our division in those emergency outcomes.
And I think a good example of the importance of safety is it's a couple areas. One is included in the city strategic plan, and there's several points in there and projects and priorities. And then also it's a collaborative approach with the entire city. And this is evidence just today with the courts and the police collaborating on safety, but Public Works Director is here. Tim Dodd, who oversees our emergency management program, is here. So it's program based throughout the entire city of Englewood. Some people just say, well, safety falls on the shoulders of police, but in reality, when we talk about community safety, it falls on the entire organization, and everybody in the city has a piece of it. So we overlap a lot on that with the police as well. So we'll just jump right into our presentation. So the department overview really hasn't changed. You guys have seen that before. Our mission and vision holds true, and we work every day to fulfill both of those. They're extremely important. The department overview has increased since last time we met. So the very top line, the sworn officers, number of FTEs at 84, that's up from 6 from last time that we met. And so we increased that staffing where we're working towards that. We haven't quite realized it. Recruiting and retention is a priority with us, and we're chipping away at that. It's a year ago when I was in here, it was 1 step forward and 2 steps back with staffing. Now it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We just had 2 people retire, long-term employees, actually retiring tomorrow. We have their retirement party, long-term employees that just felt it was time to retire. So that has an effect, but our authorized strength being 84. So we appreciate the community allowing us to increase our staffing, and there's quite a few reasons for that I can get into later if the time's right. We also increased our dispatch center, communications center by 1. We felt the need for supervision in there, so we increased it by 1 and made a supervisor. And then in the records department, you see 9 FTEs, but 3 of them are PDOs, we call them, police desk officers. That was increased by 2 from last year. We had 1, now we're up to 3. And they do the work of desk reports, watch office reports for the police officers, so they can spend more time on the street doing law enforcement related stuff. So that's the changes from.
And if I can, I know last year with the lesser full FTEs approved for the sworn police officers, we were still down about 6, had 6 open spots. How many open spots out of the 84 do you currently have that you're trying to?
So right now we're with the 2 people that are retiring tomorrow, in essence, we're down to 77. So our authorized strength before the additional 6 was 78.
Yeah.
So we're there. We were above that, and then the 2 retired, and those came pretty quick. They didn't necessarily see them coming this quick, the 2 long-term retirements. So that drops down to 77. We have 2 that are starting the police academy in August, so that'll be 2 more. We're onboarding 1 in 3 weeks. It's a lateral from Council Bluffs, Iowa. It's an officer that's coming to us. So she's a very successful officer in Iowa. So that's 3 that'll bring us up to 80, if you will.
Yeah.
The number of 80. And so we're chipping away. And it's very important that we hire the right people. You know,
Yeah.
we have testing sometimes. We don't hire anybody. We go through an entire process. There's just not, that person is just not there. You know, the suitability, the background, the fit for our community is just not there. So we'd rather have an open position than just, force somebody into the vacant position. So I'm very comfortable that we can get to that 84, hopefully by the end of this year, if, with no more retirements.
Do you have officers approaching retirement age that we've got to keep an eye on? And is there any, concentration risk of a large chunk of, and I don't know what the full retirement age, but assuming 55, 60, a large chunk of 50-year-olds, like, do you have any risks like that over the next few years coming up?
There are some that come up. So the retirement program they have it's a defined benefit program where they have a drop program where they're allowed to, drop and bank some money before they retire. We have a couple that have been enrolled in that drop program, which is a 5-year program, I think. But within that 5 years, they can go at any time. So they've kind of announced their intentions by dropping because they have to go within that time, within that 5-year period sometimes. But as far as like a mass exodus, I'm sensing you're asking if there's like a big.
Did you see 30 officers enroll and drop one year and you're like, oh, we might have something big coming in, like that kind of signaling to look at from the demographics?
But 84 officers, I think it's natural to expect that we're going to get 3 to 5 vacancies a year. Some of those are retirements. Some people just decide to move to a different profession. And so we average about 3 to 5 openings a year. And that's historically, since I've been here, that number, and it's true. So most of those are retirements. We don't get a lot of people that leave and go to other departments. In fact, I can't remember the last, but we had somebody left to go with the fire department. I don't know what they're thinking. But sometimes they'll leave. We lost a guy to IT.
Yeah.
Somebody to finance. Shit. But we don't get a lot of people leave to go to another police department.
No, as a matter of fact,
We're lucky in that.
we just did a study and 58% of our current police officers are lateral police officers from other agencies that have stayed at Englewood. So over half of our officers didn't start at Englewood. They came to Englewood later.
Chief, I had a question. I know that the voters last fall, I think, approved some additional resources for your department, including pick additional sworn officers, but I think one of the focus areas was alternatives to policing as well. And I'm kind of wondering if you could point out where some of that is seen in here. Like, I guess I'm a little surprised by the fact there's only one juvenile specialist or only one community relations type of person when I think about alternatives to policing. Obviously, I don't have expertise in that area.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So the alternative policing programs are ways for us to provide better service to the community. And historically, a lot of issues of disorder, of mental health, of substance abuse, issues that have been put on police to solve. And the core issues with them may not necessarily be criminal. When you look at juvenile issues or mental health or substance abuse, a lot of times there is a criminal connection, but really the long-term solution to that isn't introducing them to the criminal justice system. It's getting them help, and maybe it's substance abuse or mental health or addiction services or somebody that needs help with their that are experiencing homelessness, and so a lot of the services we have in the alternative policing realm are that. So our relationship with All Health, the co-responder program, and the MRU, the Mobile Response Unit program, are perfect examples of that. It provides better service to the community and people that need assistance rather than sending a police officer. The ripple effect, the positive ripple effect for the police department then is it frees up an officer that would have had to respond to that crime, or not, sorry, to that incident anyway. Now it doesn't have to, because a co-responder or an MRU or maybe a desk officer is taking the call. So the officers can spend more time at the hot spots, the high crime areas, we call them hot spots, or the high accident locations or school zones, or engaging with the community. They can spend more time being visible in the community instead of responding to these calls that weren't necessarily police related to begin with. So that really cuts to the core of alternative policing. So we have alternative policing. So we have co-responders, we have MRU, we have our impact team, our zone policing program, we have a call diversion program. What am I missing here? We have a officer assigned currently to a task force position that does narcotics. It also does educational efforts. We have a community relations crime prevention specialist, a PDO program, the community, they take reports that otherwise police officers, they're not criminal reports, but again, the police officers can be out of the station, out on the street. So it's a double benefit, one for the community, one for the police department, police staff. Answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think so. My work is in human services, and obviously early interventions are the most successful. And so I guess I'm specifically wondering about whether you feel you have sufficient staffing or specialization in that juvenile area, or is that something that you see more with school resource officers or the juvenile court system, or does that live somewhere else essentially?
Yeah, we're real comfortable with that. The juvenile specialist, in essence, works out of the detective bureau, filing juvenile cases. So it's a civilian position. It's not a sworn police officer. And Marcy, who's in the position, files juvenile cases. What we experience now with a lot of the decriminalization through the legislation is there's not as many of those. There's not as many juvenile cases that are coming up yet. We still maintain that position. We're in the process right now of reevaluating that position. We're going to keep it. And it's going to be a civilian position within the detective bureau, but maybe refashioning it a little bit to not only do juvenile case filings, but also help the detectives in other areas too with their case management. And so to answer your question, yeah, we're very satisfied with the services and as a juvenile specialist with the one person doing it.
Thank you.
And we do have an SRO too. I forgot to mention that earlier.
And I saw Member Ward pop up on screen. I'm wondering if he might have commentary. I remember from a couple of weeks or months ago during the council meeting, right after the approval of the alternative policing funding and the dedicated funding to make sure that we were meeting that mandate. And kind of along the same line, like when we define and we've got definitions of what positions and what sworn police officer positions fall under alternative policing as well.
like, is anybody have oversight specifically of the alternative policing program? And for future years, if we could kind of see that distinction, which sworn police officers are the traditional policing, which of these full-time equivalents, the 129 you have, are dedicated 100% of the time to alternative policing, as much time until they need to be pulled over to the traditional policing force, which I think was Councilmember Ward's concern a couple months ago about making sure that as a city, we were meeting the ballot measures of how the citizens passed it. So is there somebody kind of overseeing alternative policing that takes primary responsibility, or is it more of a shared responsibility? And can we kind of see some of that delineation, I think, a little bit more in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly do a better job there. Right now, they're kind of spattered throughout the organization, right? We got some on patrol, we have some that are assigned to the records bureau, we have some in communications, different programs. We have a victim assistance program, and so they're managed by me and the command staff, deputy chief Fender, and the throughout the organization. So there's not just one person. I would say the majority of the services do fall out of the patrol bureau when you talk about the co-responders and the MRU, the impact team, which is actually a special ops, but the end zone. So we do oversee them, and our focus is to keep them engaged, serving that role of an alternative policing role, if you will. We do, everything we can, with the supervision and the management to make sure that that's exactly what they're doing, is they're serving that role and fulfilling the requirements of what was written in the ballot initiative is extremely important to us.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So I think just any delineation in the future would be really helpful. So thank you.
All right.
All right, so two of the slides we put together were the funds return to fund balance from 2022 actuals. As you can see in personnel, we gave back about $474,000. That was all personnel vacancies back in 2022. We went over by about $60,000 from commodities. And that was with an inflation and rising prices. We also did have an increase in some personnel in other areas, not necessarily sworn areas, that caused us to buy more uniforms and equipment. And then contractual, we went over by about $80,000. And again, inflation, rising prices. Also in the contractual, which is also professional services, we get reimbursement from Arapahoe County E911 that comes into play when we buy almost anything that has anything to do with our 911 communication center. And so that line item goes into the negative by that amount because the revenue goes into a contractual revenue account for that E911. So that would account for some of that as well. You'll see that this year and next year, we're doing two very large purchases of Motorola radios, all of which are paid for by Arapahoe County E911. It's a surcharge that's on everybody's cell phone bills. And so every county has an E911 board that uses this money. So this year and next year, we've got over $200,000 each year. They're going to buy new radios for the for some of the officers and for the dispatch center. So you'll see that this year and next year, because that's such a large amount, we budgeted that into professional services. So it'll even itself out. In capital, we were only down by about $4,000, and we figured that was from we did have a couple of computer software expenditures that were not budgeted that came out of capital that are now in IT's budget. And so that was our police services funds returned. The next page has to do with fire and emergency management, which we also oversee. You'll see that under personnel, that line item was a negative by about $43,000. And I found that in our old higher defined benefit retirement costs, we are still paying some of our, what we call the old hire firefighters from the Englewood Fire Department before they went to Denver. And that line item was over by $43,000 last year. And then some very small expenditures out of commodities. And then we were positive for $61,000 on the contractual. The contractual pays Denver Fire and our Arapahoe County Office of Emergency Management contracts. And we had that $61,000 in 2022 because we did not have an employee assigned to us from Arapahoe County Officer of Emergency Management in 2022 for about 4 months, I think was until they had an employee leave, and then we replaced that, or Arapahoe County replaced that employee. And so they did not charge us for those 4 months that we did not have an emergency manager assigned to us. So that fund came out about 17,000 ahead.
Any questions about it, those past slides? I do want to recognize the work that Deputy Chief Vance Vendor has done on the budget. So he's taken this on his shoulders and done just an amazing job. So any technical questions or details, Vance is the guy, and he works daily with Jackie and her team, Jenny and Tyson. So I can't thank Vance enough for all the work he
Can't thank
he
them
does
enough.
on the budget, as well as Jenny and Tyson. You guys are great. So there's a slide on challenges. The first one, the ability to implement some of these policing strategies with increased demands on police. So at times we do have to draw people out of their special assignments, the traffic bureau, impact zone, to cover our primary responsibility, which is patrol operations and investigation. So when we're short-staffed, and when we talk about staffing, which we'll talk about a lot here in the next few minutes, it's not just the vacancies that we talked about a few minutes ago. It's the officer injuries, illnesses, the amount of time off that employees have. Not today is a lot more than it used to be, and I'm glad that they have the time off because that's extremely important. But it does have an impact on the schedule and our ability. We have what's called a minimum staffing, the minimal amount of people that we'll have on the street before we mandate overtime, just for safety reasons. And so that's so at times that's a challenge. The legislative changes, I talked a little bit about that with the juvenile laws, the laws with drugs and narcotics. There seems to be a little bit of a swing coming back to recriminalize some of the things that a few years ago they decriminalized or softened through the legislature. But that's at the state level and not the municipal level. But that's a challenge as well. Our records management system and reporting requirements, the amount of time it takes for an officer to process a call for service is important to understand, because for every minute they're writing a report is 1 minute they're not out on the street at a high accident location or a hot spot or a crime area or patrolling and being visible. So we try to address that as much as we can as far as the reporting requirements. Throw in body worn cameras, the administrative work with those. It's a great tool, glad to have them, but nonetheless, it brings an extra amount of administrative work for a police officer that takes them off the street. The natures of calls for service have shifted and continue to shift. It's extremely busy. The number of calls, the type of calls, the number of calls that require multiple officers to respond instead of just one. Like a shoplifter, just one officer can respond and handle that. But if it's a disturbance or a fight or in progress criminal activity, generally we'll send 2 or 3 or sometimes the whole shift of officers will show up, depending on the nature of the call. Safety is the number one priority for the community. Safety for the officers, that's always our number one priority. The shifting expectations of the community. We try to put ourselves into as many situations as we can to hear from the community on what their expectations are of law enforcement, where they want us to focus our attention. Can't be every place all the time, but hear from them on their expectations. And then the last one that's not up there again is staffing. Again, at every meeting that we have with the command staff, we talk about staffing, and not just the staffing issues of filling slots, but the impact of the morale and burnout with the police officers when staffing is low, when they're having overtime jammed down their throat. They can't get a night off to take their wife out to dinner or to watch their kid play a soccer game, or they feel bad even putting in for time off because they know it potentially is going to leave their shift short, or somebody's going to have to cover it with overtime, and it's a demoralizing impact on the department. We're trying to we're trying to address that. And again, it's not just with the openings, it's not just with the vacancies, because we got a pretty good handle on that, but it's just the amount of officers that are hurt and injured and taking other time off. So we're managing that the best we can. But it's so, going back to an earlier slide where we increased our staffing by 6 officers, not only does it provide a better service to the community, but it provides a better service to our staff within the organization, because they have that ability to where they're not always working short, and they have more of an ability to get time off when they want it, not only just when they can get the time off. So that's extremely important to us. And I wanted to talk about that as a challenge.
Chief, when you talk about hotspots, could you give us some examples? I assume like the area outside the library here, I see officers frequently.
Yeah, it's data driven, high crime areas, high calls for service area, pattern crimes. Sometimes a hotspot is not a spot, but it's an individual or a group of people, pattern criminals that are moving throughout the city, or what we find it's not, there's no geographic borders to these. So, working with other agencies on pattern crimes. And so we focus, we put a lot of resources where the problems are. And with, not just the police officers, but we look at different opportunities through the alternative police programs, through crime prevention. We last year, we got a full-time crime prevention, community relations crime prevention specialist, Crystal Essman. I don't know if anybody's ever met her. Just one of the best additions to the police department, other than Vance, that we've made in a long time. Just a dynamite person, and the work that she does on the crime prevention side. So when you look at a hotspot, you look at it from enforcement, you look at it from education, maybe engineering if you can, CIPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. But certainly, yeah, this area is important. It's a hotspot, if you will. Light rail, civic center, you got the library, you're in close proximity of Walmart, 285. There's just a lot of factors at play. The park over here, the green belt, the creek. So there's a lot of things going on. So, but there's other areas throughout the city as well. Some of them are just a house, but some of them are location based. Yeah. I think I used this analogy last time I met with you guys. Remember Barney Miller? Did you guys ever watch Barney Miller? Remember the TV show Barney Miller? He had the big map, and it kind of looked like that map right behind you. And there's pins all over the map. And there's like red or like homicide, blue or like burglaries, and black or like persons crimes. They put pins every time there's a crime. They put the cops where the pins are. Right? That's where the focus is, and that's kind of hotspot policing. You put the police officers where the problem are, but you identify that through data and different ways of identifying. We have a full-time crime analyst that helps us identify these. Works with other agencies. Barney Miller.
I can't believe the Barney Miller.
You guys are all too young for Barney. Sorry.
So you've talked about the challenge of records requirements, legislative requirements, things like that. That's putting more of an onus to make sure these records, these reports are filled by your officers. Have you guys been able to, or have the resources to look at processes and systems of that record management system to improve it? What's the state of that, and is there an opportunity there that we should consider to? Because I gotta imagine less paperwork is gonna make your officers happier, so if we can make that process more efficient.
It is going to make it happen. There's some requirements that are forced on us by the state and feds as far as crime reporting. But yeah, we look at as many efficiencies as we can through RMS, so that the end product is so much better than it used to be when you'd handwrite a report. But the amount of time it takes to get there is so much longer. So we just went through a major upgrade, a month ago, major upgrade, which I was hopeful would streamline the process more, and it really didn't. I was really quite frustrated by it. It didn't streamline the process as much as we had hoped for, but it's making the end product better. So one of the ways we're adjusting that is trying to, again, with the PDOs, the police desk officers, shifting some of those calls to them versus the police officers. Online reporting is another example that we're using. Sometimes there's a good fit for that. And but we do, to answer your question, yes, we absolutely look for as many efficiencies as we can within the reporting system.
Have you done a full review of your systems and processes, including the whatever software system as a part of that as well?
On an ongoing basis, we have a team that's assigned to that.
Yeah.
It's not just police, but we work with IT, our IT department on that that as well. And there's other agencies, that are close to us that are on the same system.
Okay.
We meet with them as well, because they're facing the same challenges we are.
Yeah, our records management system is a regional system. So everybody in Arapahoe County is on the same records management system. And then our body worn camera system is also, it's not regional, but everybody in Arapahoe County, I think, is using the WatchGuard Motorola system.
Yeah.
And it's just and then between that and the citizen contact system that we are required to use from Senate Bill 217, when you take all of those things, and none of them really talk to each other. And so we've put so much time and effort, and our IT department has put so much time and effort to try to get these systems to talk to each other. They just don't.
Yeah.
And so the compatibility is very difficult. So sometimes you're duplicating your efforts in different areas, which makes a call for service take so much more time, because you're having to enter so much different information in 3 different databases, to where, like the chief talked about, when we hired our 3 additional PDOs and records, they don't have those requirements. So when they take a report over the phone or in the lobby, they take the report, and the time it takes them is the time it takes them to enter it into the record management system, and they're done.
Yeah.
So that's a force multiplier for the uniformed officers to go in and be able to be more proactive and be more visible in the community based on those PDOs. So a lot of it, it's just a constant.
Well, and it sounds like some of the systems you get to decide, and some of the systems it's Arapahoe County or somebody else deciding, and you just got to kind of work with.
And we work within the confines of what it is, yes.
How much of an opportunity do we think the system and the processes offer? Because it sounds like there's limitations of trying to get things done. Is it something that we should allocate more resources to the system and process issue? Will that have a big enough impact, or do you think you guys have the right resources addressing the issue right now?
I feel comfortable with the resources that we have for now. We have a good team in place that's evaluating, and we look at as many opportunities for efficiencies within all of our processes, not just records management, as we can. We engage on a very regular basis with all the employees of the organization, police officers, the civilian professional groups, on hearing from them what their challenges are and having them express their ideas. Because a lot of the ideas, I could come up with a 3-page list of ideas that we've implemented that came from them.
Yep.
On how we can improve their efficiencies, or how we could deliver better service to the community. And instead of us, somehow magically understanding that, create an atmosphere, a process where they can come to us. And that's really important. It's important for the workload of the PD. It's a better benefit to the community, and it's benefit to, the employees feel hopefully more engaged. And that's really important to us, that we set a culture within our organization for that. So we're comfortable with that, and we're always open for better ideas. And we lean, when it comes to like RMS, we lean a lot on IT to help us with the updates. It worked. Yeah, we don't have a lot on the capital project side. The Fox building renovation, there's money encumbered through bond premium on that, although the project isn't underway. It's still there. It's moving at a very slow pace. I understand that there is a new project manager. Victor, maybe you can jump in on this. Through Public Works, there's a project manager on that. The city has an architect that is working on that, but that's still up there. And then the other, like the taser replacement, taser cartridges.
Are those new requests you need, or are those already worked in the capital projects budget?
Sorry.
The taser replacement?
Yeah, the taser replacement and training.
No, those are not in the capital improvements projects. No.
So that's.
There's we have a list of recurring equipment that we know is going to have to be replaced on a different timely basis for a year. And that's something we've worked with finance on. Since we started doing that, though, we've ended up having to use PD bond premium for those items through this committee, through the budget review committee. It has not been placed in our budget. It's been taken out of PD bond premium for about the last 3 years.
How much is left And the PD bond premium.
With the, Fox building and 2 other small tasks, probably about 1.1 million.
Okay.
Yeah, 1.1 million.
So it sounds like overall, things are, the challenging side are roughly the same as they were. I think your comment earlier were, you've made 2 steps forward, some, 1 step back, but are generally the same. But of course, the demand and volume is increasing for you all.
Yeah, I mean, we have experience and proud of, a reduction in crime in the city. Not a huge reduction, but a reduction nonetheless in a lot of different areas. And we're excited about that. And everybody, courts will say it's because of them, the police will say it's because of us, and everybody will take credit for it, but nonetheless, it's happening. And we're hopeful. We're going to try to pull our some 6-month data and see what the 6-month data shows, because what the last reduction we saw was based on 2022 data. So we're really excited about that and the work we're doing in the community and, trying to provide a better service. Some of the challenges we had, yes, were the same as last year. Had we not gotten the 6 additional police officers, we'd be at full staffing, right? We're glad we got the 6 and we want to make sure we get the right people there. So that continues to be a challenge for us. But I mean, I'm comfortable where we're at, and that's because of the people that we have in the organization. Vance and I and the division chiefs and the managers do everything we can on the administrative side, but the service that the officers and the dispatchers and the code enforcement, and the fire marshal inspectors and the property and evidence people and the records interactions, the people in records, I mean, they're the ones that are just out there doing just a fabulous job, and our success is based on what they do. We put that process in place for them on the administrative level, and I'm comfortable with that process that we're putting in place for them to do their job.
Yeah, and my question was really not as the challenge as that being a bad thing, that, similar conversation from last year was more like from a committee perspective, our area, which I think is kind of where you were going with some of your questions, is anything we can help you with or anything like that. I know staffing was, I think, a theme that we had last year during our presentation, but if there was anything in particular that the committee could help represent or.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We were at council last night until 10:30, 10:15. Doing the first look at our, with council with our budget, and there were 7 enhancements that we had within the police department that we presented. It's still very, very early in the process, and we have to, work through this process, work with the budget review committee, work with the leadership team of the department before we finalize that. And every department is asking, and we have to prioritize them given what other departments are asking for as well. So, what the 7 we're asking for now, I'm sure we're not going to get all 7 of them. I hope we do, Sean, but we know how that goes. So I'm comfortable in the enhancements that we've asked for 2024.
So out of those enhancements, what would your officer say is the most vital of the 7 to choose from?
The officers?
Yeah.
Police officers.
What would your officer say was the most important out of the 7? What do they need the most?
Well, so on the police officer side, on the operational side, last year when we got the 6 officers, I think if you'd ask them, they want to see that finalized. They want to see those officers hired. So when you hire an officer, you still have to potentially send them to the academy, send them through FTO training. It could be 8 or 9 months from the time you hire somebody until they're filling a hole on the schedule.
Yeah.
So on the police officer side, I think what they're looking for is that relief that I talked about earlier for them. So that was last year's enhancement. For this year's enhancement, we're looking for another person within the fire marshal's office with all the as an inspector with all the additional square footage and there's a proposal. I don't know even if it will come to light for a new ordinance for the inspection of vacant, dangerous buildings. So that would fall on the fire marshal's office. So that would increase staffing. But just with the growth of the city, there's more square footage for the inspectors to inspect, and coming up with a program where they have a better chance of getting to 100% inspections of their space. So that's another one. Also, we've we've seen a need with, to work with our community development department in the enforcement of the zoning ordinances, Title 16, if you will. So historically, that's fallen on community development, but we're asking to add one additional person to our code enforcement team, which runs out of the police department, specifically for zoning violations. That's the impact that's going to have on the police officer is pretty minimal, but it's going to be a significant impact for a better service to our community.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. I'm a little interested to dovetail a little bit into the fire responsibilities. It's something that I don't think came up last year and was always just a question mark in my mind. So I'm happy to learn a little bit more about it. So we outsource fire to Denver Fire, not South Metro Fire.
Correct.
Right? Fire, medical, ambulance, all that type of stuff. From a city aspect, how many employees, how much responsibility? You mentioned the fire marshal's office for investigations. Is that a city house position versus a Denver assigned position that we pay for? How does that work?
Yeah, we kept local control of the fire marshals. Fire marshal looks at life safety issues. They also look at permit reviews for new construction. So we kept that in-house. So there's the fire marshal and there's 3 inspector positions within the fire marshals.
But you mentioned
That's a-
investigations and we
They
do
don't-
not.
No, they don't do.
Denver Fire does
We're
ours.
still in.
Yeah.
Denver Fire will do, and this is just a lack of knowledge in that world that I have anyway. So fire marshals, which is going to be inspections and approvals and things like that, permitting on the city operations side, more or less, is under Englewood. Fire operations, protection, inspection, things like that is going to be contracted to Denver.
Yeah.
Well, not the inspections.
Inspections being afterwards, investigations, that type of stuff.
If there's like an arson investigation,
Yeah.
maybe so,
Yeah.
our detectives will work with the Denver Fire
Okay.
detectives on that. It's our case because it's an arson that occurred in Englewood, so we have to file the case. They have their fire arson investigators.
But then that'll fall under criminal services,
But on the-
not fire services at that point because of the criminal nature of the.
Yeah, on the operational side, the response to fires and medical calls, that's on now the contract itself is housed within the PD budget and we manage that.
Yeah.
But it's, and we just got, Sean and I and Vance, we just met with the leadership team for the fire department just a month or so ago. So we have periodic meetings on goal setting and where we're at with the contract. They do a really good job.
In my understanding that it's a legal requirement for Englewood to have its own fire marshal, right?
I believe that's when it was fashioned, when this relationship with Denver Fire fashioned and we kept local control. I'm assuming that came through ordinance or a resolution of some kind. So yes, it would be legal through a resolution.
But just locally. It was just a decision that was made at the time. And as I understand, the reason for that is because when you bifurcate, inspect like plan review, when a new building is coming in or a renovated building, and those plans are being submitted to the permits office, which is the starting point for all these departments that review. Having to do that through Denver Fire didn't make a lot of sense. We wanted to keep that in-house. We wanted to keep those inspections in-house so that, we can kind of keep track of what businesses are doing in the community and where they are, et cetera. So it's just an effort to be unified with plan review and permit.
So the roughly 6 million in the budget, how confident are we that's going to be consistent? Things like a new fire station, improvements of fire station, new fire truck, would that fall under the city and we have to deal with those capital project expenditures? Or it's just a flat fee contract with Denver and they're managing all of that and those needs that isn't going to go up to 8 million or 10 million some year because a new truck is needed?
It's a set amount every year. I think we're in a 20 or 25-year contract with Denver Fire. I don't remember. It's a fairly long contract and it goes up 3% a year.
Okay.
And so we're only responsible for that amount. And then we do pay small amounts for like the locker room. Didn't we pay for the locker room upgrade like at Jefferson Station? Just some upgrades to the 2 different fire stations, but not new fire stations or anything of that nature. No, that's not built into that.
The contract included $200,000 for each fire station. Like the city will kick in for you to do improvements, because we had not done a lot of improvements. Since then, really the only improvements that we've made to that is this locker room,
Yeah.
which was a mess. And so we did take that on. We had that in our building maintenance fund. But really the fire trucks, their apparatus, their uniforms, all that is paid through Denver Fire.
So we don't have kind of tail risk of that bill going up because of something it's,
Oh, no, it will go up,
what,
but not direct expenses.
Yeah.
So right now, what Denver Fire is telling us is that you have gotten an incredible deal with
Right.
that 3%. When I got here, I was like, 3%, that's ridiculous. And then when inflation, went to 6%, it's like, oh, we are getting a deal right now. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I think on average, 3% probably was about right, but they're already squawking that we're not paying for the services that we're getting, so we'll have to negotiate that.
And when is that up?
Sam, you're the keeper of that.
Sorry.
It's a long-term
It's a long-term contract.
Yeah, it's-
We're only
6 years.
6 or 7 years into a 20 or a 25-year
Wow,
contract.
even better.
But, I mean, this seems to me like it's a pretty standard contract and that's just the nature of the beast, so to speak.
Right.
Given the recent rise in costs.
They could ask to reopen.
Oh,
We-
really?
We,
Okay.
we could, given the circumstances, but
Gotcha.
it'd have to be, in relation to everything else that's budget wise that's going on within the city.
And just so I'm clear, and I'll leave the fire alone, but we house Denver Fire in our facilities.
Yes, we're very unique too, that, the ambulance service, is,
Never helped.
Denver Health. We're the only station in the Denver Health network, all the Denver metro area that they serve, where they're housed within it. The rest of them, you'll see them staged, sitting in a parking lot someplace, waiting for a call to come in. But the contract we have with Denver Health is that they are staged within the firehouse, over here by the police department, ready to go. So that's very unique to their model.
Well, and I think just like a lot of other things, that Englewood provides a really valuable service on so many levels, including this one, to other municipalities.
I think Peter, Sheridan and Glendale, to my knowledge, also use Denver Fire Department.
Yeah.
So we own the fires, or Englewood owns the fire stations. And then Denver comes in and owns the truck and employs the people. Do we have any risks around the buildings, the assets that Englewood has? Is there risk around the stations needing massive repairs, massive upgrades beyond the locker room, what we've done in the past? Because you mentioned there hadn't been a lot of investment before that.
Yeah, that 200,000 that we gave to each station at the beginning of the contract was actually within about 5 years. We kept paying till they got to the 200, but they leveraged a lot more improvements to those buildings than the 200 because they have firefighters that are carpenters and carpet layers, everything else. And they were going in there and doing, like, we were paying the bills for materials and they were, redoing all the stuff. So, I mean, the one that's on a coma, that one, they redid their own locker rooms. We just paid for materials. So I think when you look at the current state of, the systems in terms of HVAC, a lot of the circulation, just a lot of interior improvements, and exterior. I think we've redone the apron at the coma station, the concrete up out front, and things like that. The investments that we would need to be making that into those buildings, I think is going to be manageable. It's not going to be like a full scale replacement. That's one reason why we went with Denver Fire, as I understand, is because South Metro came in and said, all of your stations are trash. We're going to tear down all 3 of them, and we want you to pay us X number of dollars to build Taj Mahal station.
It wasn't.
Denver Fire was like, give us some money and we'll fix these up. So that's what we've done.
And I think part of the reason that Englewood kept the fire stations, because there was a lot of, and this happened, I think, the year before I got on council, there was a lot of backlash from the community. So I think they wanted to keep the buildings in case we ever wanted to go back to our own fire department. They could do that. Now, Teon Station is, well, for a while it was storage and then we rented it out. But currently we have it back, right?
Right, it's vacant now. And yeah, that is kind of like an insurance policy that if we can't come to an agreement with Denver Fire or someone else, we could, launch our own. But in the first year, looking at the financials, I think it was about $2 million savings in the first year. And then you multiplied that by the increased cost of personnel, pension funds and everything else. I can't imagine that, our savings just hasn't been tens of millions of dollars just in that period of time.
Contract's up in December of 35. Just looked it up.
Thanks.
You know how that looks.
I won't be here.
5 years.
5 years, something like that.
One other quick question, are the Denver fire crews that are based in Englewood, are they exclusively responding to incidents in Englewood? Or can they be pulled into Denver, for
Yeah, they-
instance, or into Sheridan?
Yeah, Denver runs a model where, they're assigned to Englewood, but if there's a large scale event that's just on the other side of the border, they'll, they can send there. They try not to, but they can. But the good side is, the good benefit is that just the opposite could happen. If there's a large scale event in Englewood, then Denver has, so much apparatus throughout the city they can bring in. And we've had, some big incidents where, you show up, it's like, holy cow, there's all this apparatus, 3 or 4 pumpers and command vehicles and, their air their rescue, they're filling the SCBA air tanks for just to me, you can't find a place to park all the equipment. And it's really quite impressive on the resources that they can bring to bear on an incident. So.
On the Denver health side, for the medical, one thing that we also have is that if one of our ambulances gets pulled into a mass event somewhere outside of the city of Englewood, they're required to bring another ambulance into Englewood. So they don't do that very often at all, because they're going 1 for 1. So it doesn't make much sense for them. So they're required to have an ambulance at Station 37 on Jefferson and 1 at 38 on Coleman.
According to Denver Fire, Englewood residents have the best ambulance service in the whole,
In the city,
probably
yeah.
the state, because we require them to be at the station, and that's not commonplace. And I think we even have an extra ambulance here or something. It's something, we have more ambulance services per capita than any other city. And that was the decision of the council to do that when we went with Denver Fire, of our council.
In the agreement too, they're required to take patients to Swedish first. Normally, they would take them to Denver General, but.
I would love to see the data on that.
What?
Whether that's happening, I didn't even know.
I think people could request to go someplace
You can
else.
request, but I think unless, I would just like to see the data on it.
I only know,
Patient request side.
I have a good friend who was transported to Swedish. Now, he wasn't able to request anything, but they automatically took him there.
I would like to see the data on it.
Well, I think sometimes if there's a reason, I have heard this before, Swedish emergency room is overwhelmed, they would take them someplace else.
Diversions, patient request aside.
Right.
I
I
would agree with you. We run into, and some of it's anecdotal, some of it actually has happened, where they should end up in Swedish, they didn't. And we do address that the best we can on an individual basis. We check into that, but you're absolutely right. It does. And, when you're dealing with individuals, sometimes it's hard at 3 in the morning but we do look at those when they have. And there are some specialty units too that, it just makes sense to, although Swedish provides a very high level service now, or used to be, they send like burn victims to university in Austin.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
They take them here to Swedish more than they used to.
All right, move on to courts.
Court.
Thank you. So, nice to meet that last slide. Thank you. So the department overview, similar to last year, our mission is to ensure justice with dignity for all, ensuring safety and community needs are met through fair and efficient judicial processes and programs. While punitive sanctions are appropriate and required in many situations, Englewood recognizes that many individuals act out in response to mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, and other personal complications. Providing rehabilitative and restorative options can improve both the individual and community's concerns. Very similar to the police department, it's those alternative sanctions that we can do in the process of sentencing. Revenues are a byproduct of the court conducting business, not the purpose of the judicial system. I remember us all having a long conversation about that last year. Revenues have decreased over the past few years based on reduced filings and legislative reforms. It's anticipated that that decrease will continue through this year. As you all have had great conversation, we have new officers coming on board, and as we get fully staffed, we are anticipating that we would have at least a slight increase in 2024 and hope that that would continue on for the years to come. Fines and fees are allocated per code and then set, determined, and assessed by the judge based on the individual case and circumstances. That is one of the justice attributes, is that you do look at fines, ability to pay various things on a case-by-case circumstance and based on a person's criminal history and different things such as that. So it's not a set fee specifically across the board.
On the variability of the fee, do we have controls in place making sure that specific minority or demographic groups aren't receiving a higher fee than other groups? And I think cannabis historically is a great example of it, where both prosecution fees and jail time has been unfortunately higher for certain groups than, specifically white groups. So
Yes, there is a lot of equity distinctions that are looked into those things, and we do evaluate periodically how making sure that we are status across those in reference to similar circumstances. No criminal history, first time offense, what are those sentences and those types of things. We do try to make those. So some of the major accomplishments, and I'm going to circle back around to your question in reference to this as well, and talking about some of those alternative sanctions, is the restorative justice program. And that's been a good collaborative process with the police department and our office. We've had over 100 referrals to the restorative justice program. Majority of those are juveniles. So you're asking about juveniles. That is one of the areas. All of our juveniles are evaluated to determine if they could go through the restorative justice program. It is a voluntary program in reference to the harmed parties and then also the victims, or the defendant and the harmed party. And so there are some processes that it has to go through, but every juvenile case is evaluated for the restorative justice program, especially when it's a first offense, so that we can try and alleviate that criminal record and process for them. And in light of that, Ames Stenson, who some of you may know in reference to the restorative justice program, has been recently applied for a grant, and some of the outcomes in reference to that is studying some of the equity across the board in those sanctions. So I wanted to circle back around with that. Another accomplishment is our effective and efficient conditional process that reduces taxpayer costs. With our caseload being down specifically in reference to our domestic violence cases, our probation officer has been doing kind of additional duties in reference to some of our clerking functions in reference to our conditional processes. And so when a person is sanctioned to a conditional agreement, that means that they are fined and then they have to do something, whether it's take a class or some additional sanctions, but not on a probation type thing. So it's not long-term. It's usually something that can be done in a very short term. But what we recognize is we have gotten into as society, and not just here in Englewood, but nationally, that it takes a little more hand-holding to make sure that people are successful and that they do accomplish and successfully resolve all of their sanctions so that they can successfully complete their case so their cases can be dismissed. So that person that's doing that is helping them do that. So call reminders, have you paid your money? Have you completed your class? Help them get their classes set up and those types of things. We also did a workload evaluation to right size our staff to make sure that we weren't overstaffed or understaffed. We were slightly understaffed, and so we did hire a couple new people. But also in light of hiring those new people, we also knew that we had one person that was leaving. In fact, 2 weeks ago was her last week. She relocated to New Mexico, and then which was our most senior staff person. And then our second most senior staff person is welcoming a child. If it doesn't come on its own, will be delivered July 4th. And so we recognized that we were going to have those that deficiency, because at the time we only had 4 clerks. The evaluation shows that we should have 6 clerks based on the caseload that we had. And so knowing that we were going to be down 2, leaving only 2 would not have been functional for the court because, as you know, people are out sick, people want vacations. Some of the other things that you run into are people are expecting remote and hybrid type work forces. We really don't have that, but we've come up with a system to allow our staff that determined to do flex time, that they can have a half day off each week. So we know at least 2 people will be out half a day. So we need to make sure that we have that coverage because we have to have our front desk covered for when people come in to file complaints or resolve their cases. And then also at least having 1 person in court when we have our court hearings and those types of things. So again, that workload evaluation helped evaluate some of that. And then another major accomplishment that we have is our out of jurisdiction virtual hearings. As you know, if a person is picked up out of jurisdiction, meaning out of Englewood, out of Arapahoe County, they would have to, historically, they would have to be transported to our court in order to be heard. With COVID, a lot of that was minimized, and so they didn't bring people back to the county because it would cost too much and there were safety concerns and those kinds of things. What we have done is we've done a lot of efforts to reach out to other jurisdictions to determine can we do those virtual hearings so that we can resolve cases, set bonds, get cases reset to come back to Englewood on their own through that virtual process. We've been successful with most counties. Ironically, Denver is a little difficult, but if you set enough time out, you can be successful. And then Jefferson County is very difficult. They, for some reason, do not want to do virtual hearings. So we continue to work with them being so close to us. So those are some of the major things that we've accomplished in this past year. Our funds returned to the fund balance. As you can see, we returned about 260, close to $266,000 in personnel. Again, we had looked at our vacancy savings. We did minimize our staff knowing that our caseload was low. Having those 2 experienced staff could continue to do a little bit of a greater workload. And so we did try to keep those vacancies for as long as possible. Our commodities, we returned about 10,500. Our contractual, our professional services, we returned about $75,000. Again, that contractual and professional services is somewhat referencing to the lower caseload because what that generally includes is our court-appointed counsel. It also includes our mandated court-appointed counsel at first appearances, and then it also includes our interpreter services. So, which by law we have to provide interpreters for those that speak a different language, also including ASL. And then also that includes those cases which probation, which we would typically assist in helping them, those that are financially unable to provide for themselves, some substance abuse treatments and some mental health evaluations and those types of things. Again, with that caseload being somewhat down, I think that's what contributed to us having that excess and being able to return those funds. So overall, we returned about $352,000 out of our budget. The challenges that we face in the court, again, I feel like I'm beating that horse, but decreased case filings. We anticipate those filings will increase over time with the new approved police personnel. Staffing, as I indicated, one of our staff has relocated out of state. We have one that's on maternity leave and will be out for about 4 months. And like other organizations, we've had turnover for those desiring hybrid and remote offerings. And so again, these are our frontline staff, are EEA staff. So based on the contract with the union, we were limited for, I think it's just recently changing. And so we're going to be looking at that. But historically, again, you had to work the same number of hours each week, not per pay period. So if they're hired for 40 hours, they had to work 40 hours. So the only way we had determined that we could do some of that flex was working a 9-hour and then getting 4 hours with a half an hour lunch and then getting 4 hours on a particular day if they flex that. So we have worked that in. And again, that does leave that vacancy in an afternoon when someone is out. One of our other challenges faced is the vendor responsiveness to our online portal needs. We went to our JTI or e-court case management system back in 2021. And with that came an online portal. As you may recall, I think we spoke briefly of it last year. It was down because it wasn't accurately capturing all of the funding mechanisms. And so it was giving wrong amounts to defendants when they would go online to pay their tickets. We took that offline because it wasn't working correctly, and we are still working with the vendor trying to get that resolved. So we continue to work with them on that, but their responsiveness is less than adequate.
Are we working with the same vendor, or do we expect that they'll be able to fill in the slow performance?
We have continued to work with the same vendor only because when we work and when we've diligently been working with city attorney's office and the IT department in reference to that, because when we look at alternatives, the costs that we've already invested versus kind of canning it and starting over would be quite expensive. So we continue to work with them. They too, like many of us, I think now with Jeremy being out, there's not a single person left in our department that was initially involved in the transition. Likewise, JTI, I think, has run into some of those same issues with turnover. So it's just kind of that compromising and working back and forth. But with our most recent change in staff, they do seem to be much, I wouldn't say much more, but they seem to be more responsive than they had been in the past. And so we are working through it. But we continually, I think time had passed where we would just kind of talk to them frequently or just kind of remind them. Now we're on it weekly. We have a project manager that does reach out to them weekly. Where are we at? Where's our timeline and that kind of thing. So we are being more, I think, aggressive.
It would seem like having that functioning properly saves you a lot of time.
It would save time and money, and, you know, obviously it helps the defendants because now they have to actually either come in or drop their payment off. They do a lot over the phone as well, but it would help with some of that staffing needs because again, you have to have people at the desk to be able to answer the phones. So yes, it would be extremely helpful. Legislation, as always, is a challenge. The most recent one is for our DV cases, making sure that we're in compliance with VRA. We'll also need internal legislation in regards to that. The good part is we have historically had our victim advocate, again, another partner, good partnership with the police department is they do have their two victim advocates that work with victims in DV cases. And so when they do that, that victim advocate is there to be responsive and to communicate with the victims and making sure that they're aware of when cases, when hearings are being heard and those types of things. So it wouldn't be a huge transition. It's just going to be some legislative changes or updates. Mental health and substance abuse epidemic, obviously, as you all have recognized in our area, there's quite a bit of our population that comes through the court that has mental health and substance abuse issues that we are trying to resolve. And just as it was talked about for juveniles, that's not always the remedy. You know, yes, there are those that do need jail and need those types of sanctions, but there's a lot of them that need other types of resolution to help them to resolve their matters. COVID impacts, we still are recovering. Obviously, as I indicated, there's no transport from other jails. I'm still determining what that new normal is. Unfunded mandates, again, has been the biggest over the last couple years. This year, they added remote public access to criminal court proceedings. We're looking at ways to try and do that as minimally cost effective as possible. So we're looking at continuing to use YouTube, which is what we used through 2020. The 48-hour bond hearings, which now include Sunday court. So if we have a defendant that's picked up on a Friday or Saturday, we have to see them within 48 hours. So we usually see people on Sundays. And so because that is, if you have a Monday holiday, if you've seen them on Sunday, then you obviously don't have to see somebody on Monday, you could skip to Tuesday. So we determined that Sunday was that best day to do that, which requires obviously a judge, the prosecutor, and a court-appointed counsel and a clerk. So it does require staffing time and that type of thing. Automatic record sealing. So any case that is dismissed will automatically be sealed. And there are a couple of exceptions, but so the majority of the cases, and again, that's a manual process that has to be done because it's paperwork that then needs to be sent over to CBI, sent to the police department, and gets processed in those ways. OJWs, we may have triggered or talked about just slightly last year. OJWs, I can't recall exactly what the initials mean, but what it was is it's a way that the DMV was able to ensure that people would pay their fines or outstanding tickets before they would reissue a driver's license. And the legislation took that away because driving, although, as we all learned, is a privilege, it is such a fundamental need for people to be able to work and to provide for their families and those kinds of things, that ACLU and various other legislators determined that that was a cruel way of managing the licensing process. So there's no longer an OJW process. People can continue to get their licenses and get them renewed, even if they have outstanding fines, whether it be in Englewood or anywhere else in the state. City mandates. So we've had quite a few legislative changes of recent, and so that just creates a workload for us in reference to updating forms, trying to get the workflows changed in e-court, those kinds of processes, and just making sure that there's an awareness. So, I mean, that's a typical part of the work, but it does contribute to the need for our staff and those types of things.
It sounds like that, and I mentioned it earlier, Chief, but that's been increasing, I mean, over the last few years. Changing constantly.
Yes. And I think that may be my last slide. Yes. So any questions that you'll, yes, sir.
Could you remind me, I'm trying to recall last year's presentation around the restorative justice element of what you do. Were you exploring like participation in a teen court or something like that? Or am I confusing meetings here?
You may be, but there has been talk about it in various things. We haven't really looked at specifically a teen court because we do run our juveniles through the restorative justice program. But there are a number of courts around us that do an effective methodology of teen courts. I think in our community, we've looked at different ways of getting them involved in boards and different things like that. There's not as great of a participation by the teens, but it's definitely something we can look forward to in the future.
And then can you remind me, what's kind of the uppermost threshold of cases that you see at your municipal court versus a defendant going to Arapahoe County courts?
So we tend to be the lower of the criminal tree in reference to, but we have it's such a wide varied area, but we do domestic violence, we have shoplifting, we have thefts, we have harassment, assault, traffic, decriminalized traffic, and then traffic offenses, those types of things.
Lots of code.
And lots of code violations. Dog impoundments, those types of things. Thank you for the reminder.
Sounds challenging.
It can be. But the variety, as always, is good, right? And that's the one thing that does appeal to staff. And that's the other area where we have to look at is the staff in order to do court work it's not a typical secretary or executive or an assistant of some sort. There's a lot of intricacies in reference to the criminal processes and criminal procedure and the way that sentencing works and warrants and bonds. And there's a lot of complicated processes within it. So you do want to make sure that you have people with experience and that have some of that knowledge. It's not somebody that you can, I shouldn't say that. You can bring someone and you can train them and you can teach them all these things, but it takes a lot of time. Even some seasoned, experienced people, it will still take 6 months to a year to become very proficient in any stuff. And so again, knowing that we were going to have our two most tenured out, it was, looking at and trying to get people in before they were gone and then taking that time because it will still take them at least, they've been here 4 months now, and it will take at least a year to be fully proficient where they would feel comfortable just being, okay, if I was stuck here all by myself, I could just do this and make sure things would be handled.
One thing that hit me that I don't know if there's any takeaways necessarily for us from a committee perspective of awareness is when you said the unfunded mandates is also the administrative piece of that. I would assume that also spills over to other departments such as HR and payroll and finance and such to how you deal with that now you're staffing people at times that you weren't previously staffing. I assume that there's some administrative stress that falls there as well.
It does, and we've talked about that, and I know as an organization we work through that because as legislation comes through, it impacts various people because anytime that we get a new category such as a new fund or a new service that we need to provide, we then have to get with finance to say, okay, what account is this going to do? What is that going to do? And then update our forms for our cash reports and different things. And then that fund then has to be created in eCourt so that when it's captured, it's being allocated to the right fund and those types of things. And then communication is usually always involved because they need to announce that and promote those types of things and do some of our printing and various things. IT has their programming that they do. So you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Most things impact just about every department.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you both. Thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
Anytime. Departments. Let's see, we're going back to the agenda. So I know we had training and I know Jenny, you had sent out a notification on that a week or two ago. But we have some training to do as a committee by the end of July.
End of July, but it's requested, but if we can't meet that day, we'll try to get close to July as best we can. Because I know we'll be having our new alternate at our July meeting, so
Yes.
majority of us can be trained in terms of the video and then review the checklist to make sure you've reviewed the board and commission reference guide. And I think there's also the charter, the Bob's Rules of Order that would be helpful. So all those links are at your fingertips.
Okay.
What was the subject of that training email?
I can't remember. I might have to resend that.
Okay.
But you have all the links in your agenda.
Fair enough.
And that's something that we can all do on our own, or should we dedicate? Okay.
Yep, you can do it all on your own at your own pace.
And yeah, it probably spills over to members' choice, but we did notice that we had a new alternative member. I saw listed notifications from the city of all the new boards and commissions folks. That'll be good. Somebody new starting with us
Joining us next month.
next month.
And what's the name of the new member?
I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. I remember seeing it on, I think the council agenda or the list, the link to
I
the
don't
list, but I don't remember
remember
now.
No worries.
12? I can't pull this
I'll
out.
send that out to you guys tonight.
Okay, that concludes what we had on the agenda. Members' choice, I think we just had the standard information around the ballot measures that we've kept on there. As we'll have more involvement in that as we move along. Any items from anybody? The only thing I had was, I need to listen to what the 7 items that came up yesterday from the council meeting from police, but the Parks and Rec survey from the study session last week was interesting. So if you have any time to go back there was it's not very long. So even just focusing on that part, it was good to hear. Very interesting to hear the survey results for the potential bond measure. So if you got 20 minutes, it's worth it. Any other member choice items?
Question, Bill, can you remind me what's our timeline going to be on drafting the report and things like that? Because I know that's coming up
Yes.
before we know it here.
I believe we start on that discussion or it's due with the presentations in August, if I recall, correct?
Yes. We have tentatively scheduled August 7th.
August 7th. So I think that's next month's focus. Is that right
It's gonna
on the agenda?
be a short turnaround time.
Yeah. Yeah, because we meet. It's our meeting, I'm looking here at the agenda,
Okay.
July 25th, or July 25th, yeah.
Are we gonna do a similar topic, report or summary as last year
Similar format, maybe?
format?
Yeah, I would think so.
So we probably should have what we want on there before next. Just at least bring what we wanna do to the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point to start going. That's what I was gonna start doing, is go back through notes. But I think that's the only item for the agenda next month. Yeah.
Be a working session, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So yeah, that gives us less than 2 weeks, from that meeting to have it.
And we've done it on short turnarounds in the past. I think the way we've managed it is we come to the meeting with ideas of the topics we want to include. We kind of have the discussion about it and then assign a small worker groups of 2 people to complete each topic and bring the report together that way. And that's how we've been able to manage it. I think last year, 2 years ago, we talked about if we could fit in another meeting with the turnaround to be proactive. Maybe we do mid-July and then the July 25th and then to finalize it and have it ready. So I guess that's an option if we want to consider adding another meeting between now and that one to get this started on it. But we've dealt with the 2-week turnaround, I think every year I've been on the board. So.
Makes me nervous.
Yeah, and we've talked in the past about moving the meeting dates to earlier in the month as well to help with some of that, but all that became more complicated than it was worth. So I think there would be benefit to having another meeting beforehand to kind of strategize it and be able to have 2 sessions, but it would be.
You guys want another bonus meeting in 2 weeks? I hate asking that of city staff.
I think it could be fairly quick. I think we just need to get our assignments of who our writing partner is, for want of a better term, and kind of what our focus area in the report will be. And then maybe we can come with something a bit more structured for that late regular July meeting. So we're not quite as frantic in that 2-week window heading up to the presentation.
And I recognize the email that Jenny forwarded here recently, but this seems like the type of meeting that would be perfect for a short virtual meeting to be able to pull it all together, especially if we're just coordinating and assigning parts rather than going into it. And then we can all have more depth to our parts as we discuss it on the 25th.
So do we want to target the 11th?
11th for virtual, but I want to be respectful of the email and the intent city has with the recent email about showing up, but I think on a bonus meeting, it might be a little bit more acceptable.
Who needs to be present from the city? Is that just one member from finance, or do we need?
I can be there, that's no problem.
I just, again, I don't want to ask 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to add another evening meeting to their calendar.
And to your point, I mean, we can probably, within half hour, 45 minutes, we can probably.
Come with your list of topics. We'll bring them all together and vote on the ones we want to include, and then we assign who writes each topic. Can we invite our new member, our alternative to the meeting? It's going to be definitely a trial by fire into the deep end on that one, but I definitely would like to include that.
We can reach out, see if they're available, sure.
I think it would be a good orientation to, one, the group, but also our process.
But I don't think it would be fair to ask them to participate in the writing.
Whatever they're comfortable with, and I'm assuming that, but just the inclusion to make sure if they can either want to show up, they're invited.
I think I would appreciate the invite if I were new.
Yeah, it would be helpful, because I know when I was new and just, for the first one, I just listened. I think Chelsea did, between you two and Chelsea, but just to be there and to listen was good, because I was like, so it was good experience from that perspective. Okay, so if it suits everybody, we'll target
The 11th.
11th, and Jenny, if you find out that doesn't work, just let us know and we'll.
Nope, yep, we'll still have it scheduled, so anybody wants to meet in here can, or if you want to, if you are all going to be meeting virtually, that's fine too. As long as we have 3, we can hold the meeting.
Do we have any ideas if folks want to come in, or do they want to do virtual?
For me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's the same for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
I'm looking now, I can come in.
a daytime decision depending on if my 4 o'clock meeting runs long that day.
Well, if at least 3 of us are going to be in person, then
I
as
think
long as Jenny's okay with it, we can be in person with the hybrid option.
And I should be able to be in person.
Okay, perfect.
If-
All right,
if I'm
we'll
in
do
it,
that,
I'll come
and then we'll have our longer session on the 25th to kind of, get more into depth, but that should be good. Okay, anything else from anybody?
I just have a little tidbit from last night that's been on my mind. all day, and that was part of the HR's presentation to council, and that $8,000 request for a third-party system to allow employees to automatically save a portion of their paycheck. And you asked about this, and I remember thinking, of all the things that we can spend $8,000 on, why would this be one of them? I think that's the purpose of direct deposit.
Mhm.
I know that my employer doesn't have a third party putting a portion of my paycheck into savings. I have direct deposit do that for me. So it's been on my mind. It's fresh. I mean, it's just last night. I don't think we need to talk about all the discussion items from last night, but I just needed to say that out loud.
Can I ask the name of the system?
Tim, do you know the name?
So yeah, I can jump in. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead. I was asking you.
Yeah, it's actually not a system. So I need to get the exact name of the legislation, but there was a federal legislation about a year ago that allowed for the creation of a program called Emergency Savings Plans. And it's similar, those of you who maybe have like an HSA for health or a savings plan or a card for transportation for work. It's a similar concept. It is just, I think this week, UPS added 90,000 people to a program like this. So it's something that really a lot of employers are not doing because it's so new. But it really is based on the fact that some statistics and things that we've read about people not having kind of an emergency savings. There are options to do matches. It's basically a program. It's really about financial literacy. And so June is Financial Literacy Month, which we thought made sense to bring this up. So it's just an idea that the HR director and I looked into. The cost could actually be substantially lower than 8,000. There was one that I saw that was about 2,100. But probably you're aware we have retirement plans. So Mission Square manages those. So we do pay them, money to manage it. Anytime we ask for a company or organization to manage a plan for us, there is a small administrative fee. We had another request last night for $6,000 for a similar program for commuting. So we just thought it was something that we could offer employees, but that was just the idea.
Yeah, obviously I've got some background in this space.
But there are hundreds of items that will never be funded.
Mhm.
The budget request last night.
So, I don't know if you're talking to Sunny Day Fund, I'm happy to make an introduction and I can get a little bit of a discount for that type of program. I do believe in emergency savings programs, especially as retention tools, because they've seen a lot of benefits. If somebody the majority of Americans don't have $400 in savings to cover a car bill. If something happens to their car and then they don't go to work and then it starts to spiral. So programs like that can really have an impact around retention if structured right. So.
Anything else? All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for hanging late.
Thank you.
$12.
Actually, you guys have